So we unlocked a new level, the Marquette method.
Really?
Yeah. I don't think I talked about this the last time.
It's like a secret level from like Mario Brothers, or
yes, more or less, pretty much the same thing. Just
right.
no mushrooms, but. Welcome back, everyone. Craig and Jonah here. How have you been, Jonah?
Pretty good. After I think the last time we met was the live stream with where we went over Father Ripperger and Tim Gordon talking about feminism. So after that, I feel kind of bad whenever my wife gives me lip now. I feel like I'm letting out God, Father Ripperger, and Tim Gordon. So for what that's worth.
Yeah, maybe you just got to put a big old poster on the wall. Glance over it every time when you need to muster up the courage. So.
Who'd be on the poster?
Yeah,
Father Rip and Tim Gordon.
Father Ripperger seems like a more intimidating figure than Timothy Gordon. That guy's probably scrappy and he could probably beat me up, but just judging by appearances and his goofy little growth he's got on his face, I feel like I could take him. I feel like the two of us together could for sure take him.
So it'd be like him and who am I thinking of? Taylor Marshall, yeah, in a tag team match.
Hey, this is getting good. But those two don't get along anymore.
Oh, they're cat fighting.
Well, I didn't know this at the time, but Timothy Gordon and Taylor Marshall were best buds growing up, and they had
really
their own talk. Well, not growing up, but they were in the Catholic space together, and they had a show, apparently a really well-known show, and then the two started catfighting and broke up.
I wonder what it's about. Money, probably.
Could be. Those two I could see how those two at some point in time could develop some friction between each other.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if they've mended fences at all, but it was apparently. Well, remember when we had, was it the Kevin James fan on?
Yeah.
That was a big breakup for him. That was hard for him because he idolized those guys.
Yeah.
And then so I've known Taylor Marshall longer than I know Timothy Gordon. I didn't really know who he was until recently. But speaking of which, so remember during the video, he was teasing for his paywall NFP course thing or whatever like that.
Yep.
Well, that's free now. That's out there now. So I don't know if he could get anybody to pay for it.
That's funny.
But it's
just $175, right?
Yeah. Boy, I'm glad I didn't spend $175 for it because it's free.
You would have been the only one.
I mean, I thought about it until he blocked me. I was like, I'm not going to go pay money to some little creep that blocks me.
With a soul patch and eyeliner.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. The one else a low blow.
Although in this clip, he says he's not a petty person and all this and that. I'm like, I don't know. But so I'm not going to do it today, but maybe on the live stream. But I watched the video. It's about 15 minutes, and I was surprised by what Timothy Gordon said about NFP and Father Ripperger, to the point where I was like, man, I agree with these guys. So anyway, maybe
so that means John Farrell is going to be upset.
John Farrell was not happy. Yeah,
okay.
that for sure. Yeah. So anyway, little teaser. I'll pull that up in the live stream, which will come out before this video, but we're not actually doing that until tomorrow. But
but John Farrell's on a lonely island there.
That guy, it's getting lonelier and lonelier.
He's fighting the good fight in his eyes. So
yeah, he was talking about.
He's got a lot of energy.
Well,
pent up energy.
Yeah. Right.
Fair enough.
He was talking about heaven and hell the other day. I'm like, John, something to the effect that you better get used to being lonely, because if you're right, there's no one else in heaven but you, and I don't even know if you could follow this stuff.
That's funny.
So, love John Farrell, but that guy is fighting a very unique war with a small army.
Over something that doesn't affect him directly.
I just don't get like, I don't know. If I was in his situation, I think I would be focusing on other stuff. This would not be the battle I'd be fighting.
Like if you were some guy that had like 19 kids, you're like, oh, look at how awesome
this
is.
Right. Yeah, he's just an odd poster child for
sex on demand. My family is great. This is awesome.
I don't know. So anyway, God bless you, John. But I don't know. It's becoming more and more difficult to follow your train of thought. So we unlocked a new level, the Marquette method.
Really?
Yeah. I don't think I talked about this the last time.
It's like a secret level from like Mario Brothers, or?
Yes, more or less. Pretty much the same thing. Just
right.
No mushrooms, but yeah. So for those that aren't familiar with NFP or the market, I'm surprised how many people really don't understand how NFP works, but NFP basically, a woman ovulates during sort of the middle of her cycle. I'm not sure what the
day 10 to 14 typically.
Yeah, we're usually on the latter part of that.
We're more the former. But.
Really? Yeah. So that's this achievement unlock would not help you then. So but so you for us with the Marquette method, it means that we have kind of a window at the very beginning of a cycle, and then we have a window at the end of the cycle, and the big chunk in the middle is
the desert.
Although it's gotten better as we've gotten older, maybe, I don't know, slowing down and whatever. It's not
hormones
easy.
Are dropping.
Yeah. I mean, I'm
hopefully nothing else drops too. Although maybe they make it easier. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
I got medication for that, but
well, if the desire doesn't go down, that doesn't help me at all.
It's true.
Having a broken tool doesn't really. So anyway, so that although I'm at that age now where those ads all show up in my social media feed, even though I've never searched for it.
I've never searched for it.
I haven't.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So anyway, the algorithm is interesting.
Yeah.
So anyway, so it was and for us that first window is like 5 days, and realistically it's like 4 and 5 are the days that you actually want to do something, and 5 being better than 4, and 5 being that's one less day of abstinence in the desert, right?
The NFP math there.
Yeah, so you're like you like if the runway clears on day 4, you hate to fly over and miss it, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, sometimes you want to make sure that it works out.
Yeah, because there's, at least in our house, there is no like back-to-back days. That's asking a lot for the kids and my wife.
A lot of things have to line up.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So anyway, so it's day 5, and we actually had a meeting. We had to do like a Zoom meeting at like 9:30 at night. And so I was talking to my wife during the day. I was like, well, date night tonight. She's like, yeah, but I don't know, I'm going to be really tired. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but I know this is our last chance for us. She's like, yeah, well, actually it's not. I'm like, what? She's like, yeah, I was looking at the book, and if you've had once you've had at least 6 cycles in, so when we started using the method postpartum, it was actually pretty good at the beginning, because like we had like 9, it gave us like 9 or 10 days at the beginning of the cycle. But then everything after that was weird because your cycles were coming back. And then the next cycle went down to day 8, and then 7, and then it stopped at 5. And it's been day 5 has been the cutoff of the opening window for a while now. And she's like, well, once you have 6 months, this is under the Marquette. Once you have 6 months, you can, and you know when your ovulation is typically happening, you can extend it to, I think, up to within 6 days of your normal ovulation date.
Okay.
Right. So for our purposes, that added like 3 days. So instead of up to 5 days, we have up to 8 days.
Oh.
I was like, oh, that's kind of nice. Because, and I said, well, because in the past, anytime we've gotten caught with NFP, it's always been a late cycle, not an early cycle, or late ovulation, not early ovulation.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. We have a few kids
that are due to that.
Thank their existence to that. So that gives a little more breathing room. It's still close to 2 weeks of abstinence in the middle cycle, but
yeah,
beggars can't be choosers.
It is interesting that. So why do you get the 2 extra days?
Because as it is now, how long does sperm last? 5 days. So they figure as long as you. The trouble with NFP is it's relatively easy to know when ovulation occurs, and then you can give yourself some cushion after that. So but ovulation doesn't always occur at the same time, and because sperm can live so long inside the female body,
5 days.
5 days, right? So I think they figure 6 days, and I don't know, that's probably.
You better make sure you got the in there.
Right. I said we should figure 7 days in, but it gives you. It's like if consistently your ovulation isn't happening until this day, you don't need to leave 10 days on the front of that, which is kind of what's been for us. It'd be like a 10-day window between the end of our initial infertile period and when ovulation actually happens. And they're like, no, you really need about 6 days of cushion on the front end. So that's where the extra 3 days come from.
Huh.
So
good for you guys.
Yeah, well, this is our first time trying this, so we'll see. Probably end up pregnant.
Good luck. It's true. Eggs and sperm don't read books, so
yeah. Tend to have a mind of their own, but she's been getting rid of some baby blankets and baby clothes, so
it's risky.
I guess we can go up to the local secondhand store and buy it back if we need it. So yeah. So anyway,
that's exciting. Maybe Mary Beth Tradwife will be excited to hear that too. But eventually, she can unlock that.
Yeah, I don't know what she's the first person I've seen that grumbles more about NFP than I do.
Yeah.
So
frequently.
Yeah. And the first female I think I've seen that grumbles about NFP at all.
That's true. She is a unicorn.
Yeah. So anyway, well, so here's the topic I wanted to talk about is, so we did episode 250, which was sort of a historical overview of solo acts and the church's teaching on it. And then we did episode 252 was sort of a kind of a follow-up and reaction to that. It was talking about poor St. Alphonsus's struggles.
Yeah, we've got his hands tied behind his back.
Right. And someone came into the comments a couple days ago, and this is a common thing that comes up, so I don't think in any of our videos we said the church has this teaching wrong. We just kind of
presented it.
Yeah, presented the historical context of it. But I could see how people would take some of our discussions into, or at least, when we talk about 2352 and the diminished culpability thing, people get the impression that
they seem to want full culpability.
Yeah. But the argument invariably goes like this. Well, if the church were to change or soften its position on solo activity or other acts, but let's just say solo activity, wouldn't that just open the door for people to argue that sexual acts between non-married people, same sex, all that is fine. That's always the argument. If we change this, if we change how we approach this stuff, won't that just give argument to everyone else to argue for what they want?
Well, and I would say that I don't think the church has to change anything, because 2352 clearly states that there's lessened culpability, which makes sense. But also, if you look at the Old Testament, those guys had all kinds of wives and were probably in all kinds of illicit relationships, and God didn't strike them down. Like King David clearly had an affair and had the woman's husband killed. Solomon had 700 wives, 300 concubines. Like, are those all illicit marriages? I mean, concubines aren't even part of marriage.
Onan's dad got the poor widow pregnant, thinking she was a prostitute, and nothing apparently happened to him.
I'm not saying that the church should change anything or that any of that is okay. But sometimes I wonder just how much God cares about it in a way. Just because there you got the select situation with Onan, but then in the Old Testament, there was a lot of other wild stuff that happened. You know, even for heroes of the Bible.
Yeah.
And I don't know what to make of that. But that doesn't mean that you want people living in illicit relationships or having children out of wedlock or any of that.
Well, the slippery slope to the floodgates is understandable, and I fully appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
But when I hear someone immediately pivot to, well, what about these other things, rather than, no, this is why this teaching makes perfect sense, etc. I'm just like, that makes it look like you're less than confident in the merits of this teaching itself.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, it's more about the other teaching and not.
Yeah, like here's my position on it. We should approach, and the church, I think, should approach this teaching on its merits and either defend it or change it, whatever the case may be, on the merits, irrespective of the implications it may or may not have for other things. We should, if the teaching is correct, we should leave it in place because it's correct, not because we are afraid of the precedent it might set, or even the embarrassment or whatever that it might cause.
Yeah, the headlines would be wild.
Yeah.
Church
Yeah.
on masturbation. But really, I don't think anything needs to be changed. It's more of an emphasis. Like, the emphasis is on, if you do this, you should automatically go to confession, don't receive the communion, you're at risk of going to hell. Whereas if you read it according to the letter of the law, most people are probably okay.
I probably look at it a little different from you. I think the idea that the language that it's intrinsically disordered and never ever okay, regardless of the circumstances, seems that's quite a statement, especially in light of the history of it. But again, do not take theological advice.
Yep, definitely don't take theological advice from us.
But I really feel strongly that if the teaching is correct, then defend it as such and leave it in place because the teaching is correct. If the teaching is in any way open to change or could potentially be wrong or imperfect, then let's fix it and make it right, rather than leave it untouched because we're afraid of these other implications. That I think is not correct. I think that is putting too much politics into the process.
So you're mostly upset with the fact that it's intrinsically evil and disordered?
I have no problem with the concept that
it's imperfect.
Well, that solo is not desirable and could, in many circumstances, become sinful
and harmful to your marriage.
Right. But given how just common and almost universal it is, and the circumstances under which it tends to happen when it happens, especially with marriages. Yeah. Right. I personally struggle with how it could possibly be, like, how God could really be so offended by that, given all the other stuff that happens all the time,
Mhm.
right? With far more nefarious intent and consequences,
It's
right?
fair. Yeah.
So that's where I personally struggle, and I'm not. Again, I'm just that's someone the other day in our. I think it was actually the Jonah 2.0 after the live stream asked, well, what do you guys? Because
Oh yeah, I saw that.
what do you guys think? And
You answer first.
yeah, I mean, so I have my personal reservations about the tone of the teaching, I guess, to some extent.
And he asked, what does chastity mean to you guys?
Yeah. So I don't think that my view of chastity is much different than his.
Neither do
Probably,
I.
right? But here's where I come down on a little bit. I think as it is as Catholics, I think we look at chastity as being this. I think it's a very difficult and high ideal.
Mm-hmm.
That is the standard, and then anything short of that is automatically grave matter, mortal sin.
It's walking
Go
a
to
tightrope.
confession, right? Like that. The drop off. I've always said this. The drop off between following the rules and any deviations is enormous.
It's like driving the speed limit, but perfectly at the speed limit every single time, all the time.
Yep. Never. Yep. Exactly.
And if you don't do it, you're dying in an automobile accident.
Right. That to me, it is the fact that I think realistically for most people, always being right at the speed limit is nearly impossible. I'm not saying it is impossible. If you are careful enough and you think of nothing else and do nothing, that's a really good analogy.
There's no cruise control either.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. So yes, all you need to do is the whole time you're driving is be watching that so that you stay 55 and you don't accidentally bump
But in the
into
meantime,
56.
you have all this other stuff going on around you. You need to pay attention to that too.
Right. And that
Or you could die that way.
yes, exactly. So when I have said it is more or less impossible for people to follow some of these things, not in the absolute sense, yes, but in the practical sense, because you only have so much bandwidth to go, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every piece of mental energy you devote to this particular thing is to the exclusion of other things.
Because you're constantly watching the needle on your speedometer. You're not watching the oncoming traffic.
Right. Man, that's a really good analogy.
On the fly.
Jeepers.
So, and I would say chastity is just using your sexual faculties within whatever state of life you're in. And I don't think that's any different than what the catechism teaches either. It's just that maybe I'd have different thoughts on the specific acts, but really that's getting into.
Yeah, this whole stuff would make more sense to me from an experiential level if we had kind of like three categories. Sort of the top category is the ideal, like you're living all the rules and not just abiding by them, but you're embracing them and you're getting the full spiritual fruits of that kind of high level.
So that's the postmenopausal category.
Yeah, that's right. Right. And then let's say at the bottom, you've got the true sexual deviance with within marriage.
Hookup culture.
Absolutely. Like guys having affairs or couples, like whatever. Like there is that deviant level where it's clearly sinful. And then you have the stuff in the middle where I think for most of us, not due to malicious wills or lack of desire to be virtuous, but just the realities of life, the dynamics and differences between men and women makes it just messy.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, you may be in a situation where it is snowing outside and you need to be watching for that, not focused on the speedometer, right? Or you've got your wife is talking to you and you need to listen to her a little bit, right? Like that is kind of the real world experience. And that's where I struggle with the emphasis on it seems like we just need to follow the rules for the sake of the rules, the circumstances be damned. And that I think is where all these people in the gray area, if you follow the strict letter of the law or the traditionalist, people are all committing mortal sins all the time. That's where I really struggle. And not even moral sins from the standpoint of they have, people say, well, are they really consenting? Are they really, I would even step back a little and like, I don't understand why what these people are doing is even objectively grave for the most part.
Mhm.
Again, you got your sexual deviance really towards the bottom. But I just think for most of us, we're just trying to balance a lot of things.
Mhm.
We're trying to have an intimate life. We're trying to follow the church's teaching. If for those of us not using birth control and stuff like that, that in and of itself puts you into a category of difficulty, regardless of what you're doing,
Mhm.
right between
Yep.
the sheets. And then, for those of us that have families, and all young kids, and then your jobs, and you're trying to like save money for your kids' college, and you're trying to advance your career so you can make more money. I mean, all that this is not.
Meanwhile, you got hormones, lack of sleep,
Oh,
kids that need attention,
right,
et cetera, et cetera.
right. So that is, to me, it is not the rules per se, but how, I don't know, rigidly people want to impose those rules on this gray kind of messy area of life that most of us occupy.
And I understand the rules if they were indeed come up by single guys that were trying to keep guys living in monasteries on the straight and narrow.
Yeah.
That makes sense because then you don't have the temptation of living with a woman or seeing a woman constantly. Like, I mean, there's just the natural feelings that come along with living with somebody like that you wouldn't experience if you're living in a monastery.
And even for, like, let's say priests and confessors, like, I mean, I can certainly appreciate the fact that if this stuff is a little more open, circumstantial based, open to interpretation, that people are marching to the priest all the time, like, hey, what about this? I doubt that the priests want to field every question about, well, what about this combination? Have we crossed the line? Is it sinful? Either before or during confession, right?
Mhm.
So but I was surprised, getting back to the Father Ripperger comment with Timothy Gordon, when they were the topic of the conversation was, Humani Vitae and this grave reason for using it, which still doesn't make a ton of sense to me. But basically, the punchline was this: Father Ripperger, to his credit, said, that NFP is not intrinsically evil. Great. Wow. Okay. But, he said it's largely, there are some distinct categories people need to avoid, but by and large, it is left to the circumstances and individual discernment of the couple. And I don't know. I think it's
fair.
I don't see why that is not the obvious approach for most of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I see Protestants who have that approach, and they got all their own problems.
Yep.
I don't know. It's just so.
That's why I think if you live a life where you focus on trying to be in constant communication with God and loving God and serving God, and just put your focus there and just not be scrupulous and just do your best. I think that, I don't know, maybe that's a better way to live than constantly caring about your sexual issues. I'm not sure.
Well, I think, and I think where your sexual issues are very much intertwined with the sexual issues of another person, or right?
Yeah.
If you're
dealing, it's not just you.
Yeah, it's not just you, and I've just got to like put my head down and deal with this problem or whatever. Like, it's a very dynamic situation.
Mm-hmm.
That I just think that the traditional kind of like Baltimore Catechism style approach to don't do this, do this, whatever, becomes not very helpful very quickly within
Mm-hmm.
the actual context of real life.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. And so I don't know what the solution to that is. If
it's more of a legalistic view and not a field manual.
Yeah, I just think the field manual needs to be a little different
mm-hmm.
than the official manual,
yep.
or whatever that is. And that's super, super hard for Catholics because we like rules that don't change like that. And I get it. Like I have that same problem. Like I know that people
Just
are,
think of the poor guys, though, that had to suffer through not having sex during Lent and Advent
yeah.
or on holy days. I mean, they were probably pretty happy when that was lifted. So it's not like
Well, I
the
got
art
it.
changes
Well,
ever.
I got into this argument where people were trying to take away my Catholic card on Twitter because I use that type of example. And they're like, well, that's different. That's not, natural law. That's not I don't want to say dogma, but that's not a teaching that can't change. That's a discipline. I'm like,
But the people that had to live through that certainly felt the effects.
yeah. I mean, I think that's sort of a distinction without difference. And I said, well, what about the church's power to bind and loose? And well, that doesn't apply to changing hard and fast moral rules that
How can
cannot
they say
change.
that?
I don't know. I don't know. It's just this stuff, because like we were just talking about, because it's occurring within the dynamic and complicated context of married and family life, and very much dependent on the circumstances and decisions of someone you have no control over, patriarchy notwithstanding.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
It's just it's such a dynamic process that rigid application of rules just, I don't know, doesn't seem to help very much. And what it does tend to do is to invoke scrupulosity and fear. And we hear from these people all the time. Like a lot of people in our community really struggle with scrupulosity and trusting in God and not being afraid, because you can hear it all you want, trust in God's mercy, God's a loving God, whatever.
With that one solo act, I need help. So.
Yeah, but then you get on Catholic Twitter and you listen to those folks a little bit like, holy crap, what if they're right? Right?
There's all kinds of people that seemingly want to send you to hell on Twitter.
So I don't know. That's a long way. I guess my answer is this: I really don't have any real issue with the concepts of the church's teaching, especially because what I said. What if we just approached a little different, not from a teleology standpoint of acts, but the relationship? What if we just said any sexual act between not like a non-married couple is wrong?
Mm-hmm.
That takes care of 90% of the stuff.
Yep.
Right now,
that makes sense.
Right now, you're then you don't have to. If your concern is, let's say, same-sex couples and all that, and I'm not interested in that fight. That's not my fight. But if for people that are really concerned about it, they would fall under the same umbrella of the same reason why you can't have an affair when you're married.
We already have a definition for marriage.
Yeah. Can't, adultery violates that, fornication violates that, all that stuff violates it. So now we're just talking about, okay, now we're within the context of a valid sacramental marriage. What can and can't you do?
Mm-hmm.
The birth control thing is pretty straightforward.
Yep.
I mean, I know a lot of people struggle with that. That's not something that I think I think natural family planning for most people is workable, so provided
they would some people lump other acts in with artificial birth control, which I don't know if that really and that'd be the issue.
I mean, I guess depending on how broad of a category you're making it, yes, they could fit in the same category, but I think in practice,
abstinence is also birth control.
Yeah.
I mean, it is.
I don't have any experience with birth control, but I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say the conjugal act with birth control is probably a far better experience than any of these other things. So
it's easy to not use birth control is what you're saying.
I don't have any trouble not using birth control. Like, even if the church changed her opinion on that, that would not be like running to the pharmacy or whatever.
Yep.
So
I agree.
But So anyway, I mean, I think, and I say that as the guy that spends a lot of time pissing and whining about NFP, but again, the problem isn't the NFP. It's what about all this other stuff? That really is what it comes down to.
It's true.
So my overall approach is this. I think that living a good Catholic life is difficult under the best of circumstances, and then you add this layer onto it when your job in life is just to keep that speedometer at 55 miles per hour.
And it's just like that song, I Can't Drive 55.
I don't know that song.
Oh, goodness. It's Sammy Hagar. It's an old song. You would know it.
Okay.
You've definitely heard it.
Media and pop references usually just go right over my head. Like you said, I recognize music. I don't recognize artist or song. Like someone says, "Have you heard this song before?" I'm like, I don't know, and then I'll hear it. Like, oh yeah, I know what that song is.
It's a 1980s reference. So
okay, so I probably heard it.
You definitely
I probably even like it. I don't know.
It's just funny in regards to what we're talking about.
Yeah. But if you've got a firm grip on the steering wheel, that keeps you on your
foot.
Yeah. So anyway, that I think is the dilemma here. And the other thing I want to say is that because I was talking to this person, and I firmly believe, and I don't know if this is correct or not, but I said I think when you have something that isn't obviously wrong, like I disagree that natural law says that, let's say, solo or other acts or whatever is clearly wrong. I don't think natural law gets us there. I think you have to have another source for that concept.
Because natural law and murder seem to go hand in hand. That makes sense.
Yeah, it's not in the same plane. It's not in the same plane. Like those things are fairly self-obvious to any kind of good person. This stuff is not.
Yeah.
So if it's wrong, I think it has to be based on some rule other than natural law. Especially given I've never even come close to having. I've never entertained thoughts of murder. I'm sure my wife has. But I've never even thought, do I have to bring this up in confession? No, right? But there's other stuff is there all the time.
Or theft.
Yeah.
Lying at people.
I probably should confess that more often, but that stuff is just like, I don't know, when it happens, that was wrong. I need to go confess that. But this stuff, it's just like, it's a different thing. And so I personally think, given the amount of effort it takes, if you could even do it at all, to comply with some of these rules, I think the burden is heavy on the rule makers, let's say the church or whoever's making the rules, to make it clear why this is and what the source of this rule is. And someone argued back, well, why isn't the burden on you to prove that it's okay? Right? I'm like, I don't think it's my burden. I'm just pointing out. I'm pointing out the problems with this concept.
It's like trying to prove a Bigfoot exists based on a trail camera photo. Like the guy with the photo just presents it.
Right. I think it's much harder to prove a negative, like prove that it's not wrong, than to prove, oh, this is why it's wrong. I stand by that. I firmly believe that if you're going to tell people that it's gravely disordered to do something that their natural, I think, well-formed experience would not clearly get them there, I think it's your job to show why. But I don't know, maybe I'm wrong on that, like I'm wrong on everything else, but so anyway, that is that's kind of how I approach it. I think
I don't know. I think life is tough. We just have to focus on loving God the best we can and serving him. And I don't know, instead of just being scrupulous.
I've gone through phases of my life where I was all in on the scrupulous stuff, and then there was phases I was just all in. I didn't care at all anymore. I was like, whatever. And I could say where I was the happiest was where I had kind of a balance. But I'll tell you, living that super strict scrupulous thing and running to confessional every time I have any kind of a, blip on the radar is just, I don't know.
It's tiring.
That's a hard way to live. And it sure is hard to like develop
I'm sorry.
a good spiritual life and an attitude about God.
And when you listen to Ligori and he says that you shouldn't confess the same thing more than 3 times a year, I mean,
that guy.
You can get really scrupulous.
Yeah. That guy. I know he's a doctor of the church and all, and I know he's a saint, but.
So then you just go to confession every 6 months and just play it safe. I mean, that's what would happen. I mean,
I don't know how you I don't know how you realistically be a married person under those circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, maybe back then they were only allowed to do it twice a year anyway. So I don't know, maybe that.
Yeah, do you really think they did? I mean, they didn't have anything to do at night. No, they didn't have Netflix.
Yeah.
They had to work all day.
Yeah.
Got blood flowing all day long and then go home.
Maybe they were just so nutritionally deprived and the bubonic plague was constantly wearing them down. That they...
the rats infesting their house.
Yeah.
That's really killed the mood.
Yeah. Crawling over the sheets. Oh, my.
So it's tough to say. You're right. We can't know what those circumstances were like.
But humans usually find a way for this thing, so I think
it's true. We have survived this.
Yeah, under the most arduous of circumstances, we tend to find a way.
Whether it was the rats or the church telling us that we can't do it, somehow we made it.
Right. So I don't know. That's how I approach it, and I don't know if that's technically the correct way, but I think that is that's how I kind of try to make sense of all this.
I do just know that God loves us all and he meets us where we're at. And if you earnestly seek God,
right,
he will definitely work with you in some ways. I don't know. I just don't ever feel like there's anybody is hopeless no matter what their situation is with any sin.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you have the good thief after all.
Right. Go to confession.
Mm-hmm.
Trust in God's mercy.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's the name of the game.
Yeah. So yeah. All right. Well, for those of you listening to this still, we've been kind of talking about this for a while, but I think what we might try to do is we'll have our Sunday episode. This will be a Sunday episode. And then we may or may not do a Wednesday episode, especially if we're going to do a live stream during the week. But the live streams tend to work best on Thursdays. For us, Wednesdays don't work well. We're Catholics. That's CCD night and all that. So you have to let us know one way or another whether you like that. It's easier to prepare, I think, for a live stream than one of these. If you want to like make it good and substantive, so what I have in mind is for our Sunday episodes is to maybe actually pull up a source and actually dig into it and get up the fancy slideshow and stuff like that a little more often. And then this live stream is more of a just kind of a grip it and rip it, kind of go with the flow sort of thing. So we're going to try that out for a while. If people are just deeply unhappy and they just got to have that 5:00 p.m. fix twice a week, you'll have to let us know. But it is, I love doing this. But it's freaking 5:30 in the morning, Wednesday morning when recording this, and we've been doing this twice a week for a year and a half now. Almost. Yeah. Although I got to make one final comment, and then I'm going to let you go. So when I was sick here, and that we could not get an episode out, and then the next week it resumed. Literally, we have not missed an episode for a year and a half straight. Other than that,
wow.
And so last week I was looking at our views, and our views were down. I was like, "What the heck's going on?" And so I had the VA look into it. And she's like, "Yeah, Google noticed that, or YouTube noticed that you didn't put out a video that week, and it kicks you out of the algorithm. And you got to start over."
Really?
Yeah. So that's really annoying. I mean, we're basically back up to it again, but it doesn't like inconsistency. So you miss 1 week, and it thinks you're quitting.
Boy, so it's like having another wife.
Yeah, for Christmas.
Man, you better follow through.
Yeah. I mean,
quite the punishment.
yeah, maybe if I'd have known that, I'd have gone up and just done like sign language, or like, you know how the people do those
Yeah, the sign.
charts?
Yeah.
I actually thought about that, a whole episode of just like the charts or whatever. Just do that for an hour to keep the algorithm happy, but whatever.
Well, that's fine.
So anyway,
sorry to let the algorithm down.
good grief, yeah, it's a lot of people to keep happy.
Yeah, that is.
So anyway, well, I appreciate everyone listening. If you're not already on our newsletter, please get on that. And if you'd like to join our Discord, be a link below. Just go to unchartedcatholicman.com. That'll direct you over to our link tree that has links to all that stuff. That's the best way to find us. So anyway, I think that's it for today. So thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you, Jonah, as always. And until next time, everyone.
Bye.
Have a good one.